Hey, you. Yeah, the one who's been ignoring their HVAC system again this year? Don't spend another season hoping your furnace works. Be sure with help from the team at Legacy. An annual tune-up keeps your furnace running safely and efficiently when you need it most. Visit LegacyHeatingandAirInc.com for online scheduling and special offers and discounts. While you're there, sign up for an annual maintenance plan starting at just $13 a month. Legacy Heating and Air, a Cook family business.
A Cook family business.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, brought to you by Legacy Heating and Air. I'm Eric Hansen. The guy in the other box is Tyler James. Covering soccer for us tonight is Charleston Beaux. Notre Dame is in the national championship game against Clemson. As we start the show, it's a 1-0 Clemson lead at halftime. But we're going to talk American football on this show tonight. If there's a really encouraging update from the soccer game, we will bring that to you. But there's so much that is going on with Notre Dame here. Once the game stopped, lots to talk about in terms of transfer portal action, opt-out action, just all kinds of things, coaching action, and we will also have question action. You can ask your questions live to us, or we'll work them into the conversations. Tyler James is going to take you through the procedures and everything you need to do in terms of likes and bell ringing and all that stuff.
Yeah, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's free.
And hopefully you actually like it, but we're begging
No,
to
I don't care. Even if you don't like it, and then comment that you don't like it. That's how we want it. That's how you game the system, Eric. So yeah, interact with us. It helps our channel helps us reach more people. The more people that are interacting with us, we appreciate those of you who have already submitted questions. Robert Halicki, Frank Sarah, and Brendan McCarthy. Thank you. We will get to those at some point. If you are new to the YouTube proceedings, submitting a question is fairly simple. Make sure you've clicked through to either the YouTube app or the YouTube website to make sure that you're using the YouTube interface. On the right-hand side on a desktop, you should have a chat box where you can submit questions. And then if you are using a mobile device of some sort, the chat box should be below our talking heads. Also, we have a 30-day free trial of InsideNDSports.com available to first-time subscribers. If you use promo code NDYT, a code that is exclusive to our YouTube audience here, when you sign up, you get free access to our premium analysis, recruiting and transfer portal coverage, and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we always are sharing what we're hearing before we tell you anywhere else. There's a link to sign up for that in the video description below, and I'll send it back over to Eric.
Okay. Well, we are going to have a very short reset before we get into the news of the day. So the Irish are still 9-3 and ranked 16th in the final college football playoff top 25, heading to El Paso, Texas for a December 29th Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl matchup with number 19 Oregon State, who's 8-4, with diluted rosters for both teams. Mm-hmm. And we are going to start with quarterbacks. Quarterback is the top news of the day, and we will start with Sam Hartman saying goodbye to Notre Dame. He made about a 5-minute video that he put on Instagram. He really didn't. He implied that it was his last game, so he needs to redo the video. But we were able to gain confirmation that the implied message was that he had played his last game for Notre Dame against Stanford. Steve Angeli will get the start against Oregon State with Kenny Minchey backing him up. Hartman joins Blake Fisher and Maris Leofau as opt-outs, along with 12 active scholarship players who have entered the transfer portal, some of whom have already found new homes. So, Tyler, what do we make of this? Was this a surprise? Do we think this is the best thing? Let's start with Hartman.
One, I would not say it was a surprise. Especially given how many other players have either opted out or expected to opt out, and the losses at wide receiver. It's going to be a very different offense in terms of personnel than it was when Notre Dame played against Stanford. And I don't know that Sam Hartman had a lot necessarily to gain by playing in the Sun Bowl. I know there are people who say who hey, Sam Hartman didn't have the best season possible, so why not play another game to try to improve what he did? I don't know that it would make a difference one way or the other if he plays poorly or plays great in the Sun Bowl. I don't think that's going to erase or sort of significantly change the book on Sam Hartman. It's a long book as it is. So I think the scouting report is pretty deeply written at this point. It would have been a neat opportunity to see him sort of lead another group of guys that he hasn't really played a lot with. But I mean, that's essentially what he did at the beginning of the season too. So it's not like that would necessarily be a new opportunity for him. So I understand the decision. I would always like to see a guy play another game, but I don't necessarily fault him either.
Right. I think had Oregon State's defense been full strength, maybe there was something to prove there. Mm-hmm. But their opt-outs have been kind of trickling in. And at first it was all these stars on the offensive side of the ball, but there's some pretty significant missing players on the defense now as well for Oregon State, as well as their kicker, who's pretty good.
Right.
I don't know what kind of backup kicker they have, what kind of depth they have at kicker. So Steve Angeli gets a start. That's what I think a lot of people in the fan base would have liked to see anyways. Aside from the personnel differences, we're going to see some different wide receivers and likely won't see Audric Estime, and there will be some different offensive linemen. How might the offense be different with Steve Angeli running it, or do you think it's going to be pretty similar to Sam Hartman?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be significantly different. And maybe that has something. Maybe that is a critique of the offense this season, that it didn't necessarily change a lot to best suit Sam Hartman. And maybe I do think Sam Hartman's strengths and Steve Angeli's strengths are probably a little bit different, but I don't think that Notre Dame necessarily ran an offense that was like built specifically for Sam Hartman in any specific way. So I think Steve Angeli should be able to step in there and run a pretty similar offense. Maybe he's a little bit more comfortable doing some under center work, having done that at Notre Dame as a young player and being trained to do that. Whereas Sam Hartman was sort of doing a lot of that for the first time when he came to Notre Dame. So maybe there's some better play action looks under center that Notre Dame can run with Steve Angeli. I think he can. We've seen that he's comfortable getting outside of the pocket. Sam Hartman is too. I don't know if Notre Dame maybe use that enough. Maybe that'll be used even more with Steve Angeli. So a lot of words to say. I don't really think it'll be very different. Do you, Eric?
I don't. I think had let's say Hartman was going to be available just in case, suited up, but they were going to give Steve Angeli the start, then maybe you might run Steve Angeli a little bit more in some planned quarterback runs. Not that he's a markedly better running quarterback, but he's also not preparing for the NFL either. But you're down to two healthy scholarship quarterbacks on the team. So I think you may want to hold back from that a little bit. But yeah, I assume it's going to be similar. And I do think it would be good to see a little bit of Kenny Minchey if you're going to give Steve Angeli the start. If you can work Kenny Minchey in late in the game, I think that would be a plus too. And I think he would have a little bit different play calls, but
that's only if it's lopsided, though, right? You don't. He's not going to play in the second half if it's close.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. That's what I'm saying. If you can work him in the second half, because the game dictates that that's not a risk, then I think it would be great to see Kenny Minchey in the game. But
what do you think of this opportunity for Angeli? And do you think there's any chance that Notre Dame's better off in this one game having Angeli rather than Sam Hartman?
I don't know that they're better off. I think Sam Hartman was the better quarterback all year. Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of people, I've gotten a lot of emails and people on our message board as well and in chats have tried to convince me that, Steve Angeli playing meaningful snaps has some worth to it, and I don't disagree with that. But in this particular game, I think what Steve Angeli sees against Notre Dame's number one defense in practice is far superior to anything he's going to see in the Sun Bowl game, especially with Oregon State's roster watered down now. When they were at full strength, they were a decent defense, and they played against some pretty good quarterbacks, Michael Penix and Beaux included. They did not play USC this year, so they didn't have to face Caleb Williams, but still some pretty good quarterbacks in that conference. And Noah Fafita from Arizona, who was a top 10 pass efficiency guy. But, you know, the bright lights, it's going to be a sellout in El Paso. I think a friendly environment to Notre Dame, but not a home environment. So I think there's some benefit, but I don't think this game is going to tell the coaching staff. It's not going to be a revelation that, oh my gosh, we've been selling this guy short, or I think they know everything they need to know going into what would be an open competition, at least in name, in the spring. Now, we may get some quarterback news before the show is over, but so far we haven't gotten it today. So we're going to move on to the transfers who have committed. And there was a new one today in Beaux Collins from Clemson. And Tyler, what can you tell our viewers about Beaux Collins?
Yeah, he's a 6'3", 210-pound receiver from Clemson. Caught 38 passes for 510 yards and 3 touchdowns in 11 games this season. His year ended early with a torn plantar fascia in his foot against North Carolina. So I don't have a timeline for what that recovery looks like. But he's someone that has had some injuries throughout his career. Last year, he had a shoulder injury. They actually suffered in the Notre Dame game that he played through the end of the season. So a guy that's been on Notre Dame's radar forever. I covered him as a rising sophomore going into his sophomore year at St. John Bosco out in California. He camped at Notre Dame and was the most impressive receiver at that camp. Notre Dame didn't end up winning that recruitment. Obviously, Clemson did, and sort of understandably given Clemson's history with wide receivers as of late. And I don't know that he necessarily has met his potential there. We're talking about a top 100 type receiver coming out of high school. But he's played all 3 seasons at Clemson. So he's very experienced. He can make some big plays. I think he can make contested catches. He's not necessarily a speedster, but I do think there is some big play potential there, and a guy that certainly adds some needed experience to the wide receiver room that was starting to get depleted pretty fast at the end of the season here with the transfer portal.
So since we joined you last, Chris Mitchell from Florida International has joined as an incoming transfer portal. And then I think it might have been during the show that Jordan Clark, from a DB from Arizona State. So there's 3 so far that are in. We expect there to be more as we go through the month of December and into January. So what's your assessment of the incoming talent so far? We talked a little bit about Beaux Collins. What are your thoughts on Chris Mitchell? What are your thoughts on Jordan Clark?
Yeah, I like Collins. I like Mitchell the most. I think he's the best addition so far. He can take the top off of defense. He has speed. He's a big playmaker. 64 catches for over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns this season at FIU. Certainly that's not the best of competition, but he even played well against Arkansas, which isn't the best that the SEC has to offer, but is a Power 5 program. So that is a good addition, and the speed and an outside receiver that can make plays, I think, is something that Notre Dame needed pretty significantly in this transfer portal cycle, and I think that's what they got in Chris Mitchell. Jordan Clark is an experienced nickelback. I think that's a position where it might be pretty smart to sort of continually recruit veteran nickelbacks if you don't have them on your roster. It worked out for Notre Dame this past season with Thomas Harper, and I think that's what Notre Dame's sort of hoping can be the same for Jordan Clark coming over from Arizona State. another graduate transfer. Clark and Mitchell are graduate transfers. Beaux Collins is not a graduate transfer. I had reached out to someone who would have a pretty good idea about this before his visit to Notre Dame, and I was told that he did not intend to stay at Clemson to graduate, which he's been on pace to graduate at the end of this academic year. So he would be a semester short there. I don't know exactly what the plans would be moving forward. How much of his credits transfer over. Is graduating from Notre Dame realistic? Does he just end up graduating from Clemson once he's done playing football? I don't really have the answer to that. But at least as of now, that's my understanding, that Beaux Collins is an undergrad transfer and not a graduate transfer, which is a bit of a twist for Notre Dame because we don't see a lot of those.
It is, and it's pretty significant if that trend continues, and we believe that Riley Leonard is going to end up in this transfer class. Let's kind of update the Riley Leonard situation, then we'll talk about the other guys that have visited in the past week.
Meaning, what has something happened while I was talking? I'm not exactly
No,
sure
I'm just saying we do expect Riley Leonard to end up at Notre Dame, correct?
Yeah, that is still my expectation. I think Notre Dame is in the pole position to get an announcement from Riley Leonard. As maybe my pause there indicates that I wouldn't even be surprised if it happens during this live show.
I wouldn't be surprised either.
So that's why I was asking for clarity there, making sure I didn't miss something while I was talking. So yeah, Riley Leonard visited Notre Dame last week. That's been Notre Dame's go-to target in the transfer portal this cycle. I think that Notre Dame wins out there. Notre Dame also received visits from R.J. Oben and Mitch Jeter. R.J. Oben being a defensive end from Duke, and Mitch Jeter being a kicker from South Carolina. Both those guys visited over the weekend. I think Notre Dame's in pretty good shape to land all three of those guys. I don't know exactly sure how that timing's all going to play out, but I think Notre Dame has done a pretty good job here so far with the guys that's been able to get on campus for official visits in the transfer portal.
So there's one guy that's visited that we're not sure about, and that's Josh Kelly, a wide receiver from Washington State. What's our read on that? That he's going to take more visits?
Yeah, he's looking to take some more visits. I would qualify him as a miss at this point. I mean, certainly things can change. I think Notre Dame's going to look into some other options because that's what Josh Kelly is doing right now. So I don't feel very confident that he ends up at Notre Dame. As we've seen, and now the transfer portal era isn't extremely long, but typically guys that end up committing do it pretty quickly after they visit. And that's not that dissimilar from recruiting, but especially in the transfer portal process, not only do they commit soon after they visit, but the first visit is oftentimes the last visit. A lot of guys have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for, and some of the visits are more crossing T's and dotting I's than trying to figure out if this is something that they're interested in. They're already interested in, otherwise they wouldn't be making that visit because it's a pretty small window that you want to sort of make your choice and get set up for your next go around, especially when you're someone like who's a grad transfer and you want to get into school and get going next month.
Maybe he was expecting chili and sea bass on the menu. Anyways, do we want to jump into Mike Brown next, or do we want to go to questions before we go to Mike Brown?
We can go to questions.
Okay.
Here's the first one from Robert Halicki. Is the addition of Beaux Collins essentially a Tobias Merriweather placement, or do you think we add one more wide receiver and the Texas A&M tackle?
In terms of role, I don't think that they're similar type receivers, but in terms of numbers, I think Notre Dame will take 3 wide receivers, as Tyler was kind of alluding to. And I don't know about the Texas A&M. Chase Bisconis, is that the defensive line?
Bisontis, yeah.
I don't know that that's a fit or that's got momentum. I think Notre Dame would look at a possible starting tackle. I don't know that he's a guy, even though they recruited him hard out of high school. I don't know that that's a fit. But in terms of how Collins would fit in Notre Dame's offense, I think he's more of a possession receiver than Tobias was. probably would play into the boundary, I'm guessing, because they would want somebody with speed. It seems like Mitchell would be more the guy that would be in the role over where Rico Flores and Tobias were playing on the field receiver side.
Yeah, exactly. That is how I see it. As for Basantis, yeah, I don't know that there's been a ton of traction there. I know there was a report Chase put out himself that Notre Dame was someone who reached out to him along with dozens of other schools. Notre Dame's reaching out to lots of kids that get into the transfer portal.
Right.
There's a lot that has to happen, but between the reaching out portion and there being a serious chance of him ending up at Notre Dame.
Yeah, there's a difference between just putting feelers out and doing your research and inviting you for chili and sea bass and a visit to campus.
What's the chili and sea bass joke? I don't get it.
It's just something that maybe it was not on the menu, that he got steak instead of chili and sea bass.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was just a reference that was dated that I didn't understand. When you said it, I was like, I don't know what he's talking about.
So you think it was a dad joke? Is that what you're saying? An old man joke, since I'm basically similarly aged to your
Well, we have a lot of similar taste in humor. We're big Wayne's World and Austin Powers fans. So I was like, wait a minute. I mean, I know they got
it was in neither of those movies. All right, let's move on.
Frank Serra asked, how many transfers will Notre Dame get?
How many do they want, or how many will they get? I think that they could be get up to 10. I think that might be realistic. Let's go through the positions off the top of my head. So they'd like to get 3 wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Probably would take an elite offensive lineman, so we'll say 4 there. They're going to take a quarterback, that's 5. They are going to take a defensive end, that would be 6. They've taken a nickel at 7. I think probably a safety makes 8, a kicker makes 9. And then you have some luxury positions, maybe a tight end or a second defensive end.
Or a defensive tackle if Riley Mills moves on.
Right. If Riley Mills moves on, getting Howard Cross, the third back, is huge. And we'll go into that here in a little bit. But I would say 10 is pretty realistic number right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're projecting, and there's a long way to go there. Obviously, we feel good about a number of those guys that we've already discussed. But there's still plenty to change. And I mean, I think we're sort of thinking about what's going to happen this portal window. And obviously this portal window, meaning the guys that enter the portal now, they don't have to necessarily commit now. Although if they're going to transfer between semesters, they would need to do that sooner rather than later. But things can change. Obviously, guys are going to end up leaving in the spring again. And then there's another whole nother window of guys that they can bring in.
Right.
But I think as of right now, that's probably a decent number. I mean, it might be a little bit on the high end because, I mean, that sort of takes for granted that Notre Dame is able to get everyone that they want to at all those positions, which doesn't always happen. But I think Notre Dame is being aggressive in the transfer portal and trying to improve its roster for next season, and those would be places that they're looking to do that.
They certainly did their research because they had people in here pretty quick, and it's a very competitive market, and kudos to them for doing that.
All right. Brendan McCarthy asked, are Tyler and Eric eating PB&J sandwiches tonight? I love Angeli, but I will still be eating the Chuck Weiss bi-week burger.
We have this software called Otter that helps us with transcriptions, kind of, and it never has Angeli right. It is always A-N-D jelly, Jelly. So, yeah, that was a clever tease, I guess, that Notre Dame put out to let us know that Steve Angeli would be starting. They had the banana singing peanut butter jelly time. So I was amused by it.
Yeah, it's not the most sonically pleasing song, but I think it's a good joke. And they didn't waste much time. As soon as Sam Hartman announced that he was done without exactly saying it, they put out that tweet and let everyone know that they're ready for Steve Angeli. And I know Sam Hartman shared it right away on his Instagram. He's been Steve Angeli's #1 supporter seemingly throughout the season, and wanted to give him some props and talking about his bright future. So a good opportunity for Steve Angeli coming up.
In pure taste, I would take a bi-week cheeseburger over peanut butter and jelly anytime.
Agreed. All right, John Murray asked, good evening. I'm having trouble reading these from. Good evening from Montana. From Montana, great day to be Irish. Who will be the most important receiver next year?
Let me think about that. Most important receiver next year.
I think it's a bit of a crapshoot, right? I mean, it could go any number of directions.
Yeah, because, I mean, Jaden Thomas and Deion Colsey are still really good players who didn't get to show that this year. Jaden Greathouse is coming on. I wouldn't write off Jordan Faison. I'm not saying he's the most, but I don't think he's going to fade into the background. But I would say from this standpoint, I think if they don't get another field receiver, Chris Mitchell in some ways could be a very underrated, sneaky, important receiver, just because the better that field receiver is, the better Notre Dame's offense is all around. So I'll say Chris Mitchell.
Yeah, I think that's the way I was thinking about it as it currently sits, because he's just the most different. I think he brings an element that I don't know that any of the other guys do. Certainly Jordan Faison has speed, but he's not. I don't know that he's going to be an outside receiver type playmaker moving forward. So I think Chris Mitchell has a very good chance to be Notre Dame's most important receiver. I mean, coming into this season, I thought it was going to be Jaden Thomas. I really like Jaden Thomas as a player, so it wouldn't shock me if he ended up being the most important receiver next season. He had some unfortunate luck this year with the hamstring issues. So those are guys that I would probably circle at this point, but I think it's a long list of guys that could potentially do it, because it's going to be just such a new combination of guys. We're talking about a new quarterback, and I think the variables there are so many that I think it could go any number of ways. We can get this to this, but Evan, I think we touched most of it. Do you guys have any insight on Riley Leonard or other transfers? Did RJ Oben's visit go well?
I'll let you answer those because you already touched on them and you are more.
Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame is hopeful that Riley Leonard will join in its future roster coming up in the future. And RJ Oben's visit did go well. That is my understanding. I think he's another person who could very likely end up in Notre Dame's roster for next season. So Notre Dame did a good job with those guys this past week. Leonard during the week, and then Oben over the weekend.
I am not used to notifications from a soccer account because it not only tweets goals, it tweets near misses.
That's the
Notre Dame has game. A bunch of those.
That's the game, Eric. Near misses. All right. We are not Marshall asks, why is it doing this to me? It is giving me a real hard time. It's making it blue and I can't read it. All right, here we go.
You want me to read it?
I got it. I just have to click over. It's just not working how it normally does. What does life after Joe Alt and Blake Fisher look like? Using your crystal ball, is the O-line a concern heading into 2024?
I don't know if it's a concern, but I think Tyler has said this before. If there's an offensive line without Joe Alt on it, it's hard to envision it as a better offensive line than this year's version, no matter who the other players are. Mm-hmm. And you're losing Fisher and Alt. I mean, I like the material that's coming up. Tosh Baker was a very highly thought of recruit coming out of high school. Didn't have a lot of football under his belt. He's hung around at Notre Dame a long time. He was a college basketball prospect up until like his junior year of high school out in Arizona. And I love Emil Wagner. I mean, incredible athlete who was just undersized when he came in. So I like the upside for both of those guys. And I would think that they would have the inside track on those two tackle positions. There are some other young tackles that are pretty talented on the roster as well, but I'd say it would be hard to bump those two guys. And then there's always the prospect of bringing in somebody from the portal, but I think it would have to be somebody better than Chase Basantis to beat out those two. I don't know. I'm impressed. Emil Wagner is my offensive line crush, so, and Billy Schrauth too.
Yeah, I think
Football crush.
I do think it is a concern. I've been expressing that for some time now, especially if just losing Joe Alt is enough. Like that, I think people have maybe taken for granted how good he is, and I think Notre Dame is due for a pretty big drop off for whoever plays left tackle next season, because I doubt they're going to be the number one offensive lineman in college football. So who is that going to be? I think that is a potential spot for a transfer if Notre Dame can do that. I would imagine that would be someone who's probably a grad transfer who has experience at it. I don't know if there's necessarily a match there. I think offensive line transfers can be difficult, but they can work as well. I mean, there's been varying degrees of success there.
Tyler,
center,
don't you think interior guys are more apt to transfer if they're elite than a tackle who is more in demand by the draft?
If
you're talking about,
I think that at least from my knowledge, the history, and but the history is not even that long. Like the one name that comes to mind to me, and I got to look his name up because I will butcher it if I don't have it in front of me.
I can butcher it without having it in front of me.
I know how to say it, but I need the spelling in front of me. It's Olu, who transferred from Virginia to Michigan. Olusegun Oluwatimi was the center at Virginia, and he transferred to Michigan ahead of the 2022 season.
Right.
And then he won the Remington Trophy and the Outland Trophy after that season. Now,
how did he win the Outland Trophy over a defensive lineman from Texas?
I know, right? Yeah, Notre Dame's guys can't do that. I don't get it. So I don't know. There's not a tackle equivalent to that I'm aware of. You look at like Ohio State. They brought in Josh Fryer from San Diego State, I believe. He wasn't. They were hoping he would be the left tackle. He ended up being right tackle, if I have that correct in my head. And so I think it's hit or miss, and so you have to sort of find that right combination of a guy that had some success somewhere, but also wants to take that next step up, but can also play at that next step up. So it's a pretty thin or small needle to thread. So I think your instinct might be right that maybe that it's easier to do that at the interior than the outside, but that's the opposite of what Notre Dame needs. Like Notre Dame should be pretty set on the interior. I think it probably has too many guys for the interior line positions, and is going to need to figure out what its tackle positions are. And I have been somewhat critical of Blake Fisher's season. I don't think he reached his potential at right tackle this past season, and was nervous if he were to stay about him being the left tackle. Now, maybe I would prefer him as the left tackle than, say, Tosh Baker, but I think that there was going to be a challenge for him to shift over from right tackle to left tackle. So if Blake Fisher is someone I'm nervous about, like, is there really going to be an answer that Notre Dame's going to find and be like, okay, I'm certain that this guy's going to be a great left tackle for Notre Dame next season? I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done this offseason to prove that the offensive line can play as well, or if not improve on what it did this past season.
Right, but there are guys that take jumps that you don't always see coming. Like Mike McGlinchey wasn't a top 250 player. It's a guy that Harry Heastan loved,
right,
and thought I can make him into an All-American, and he did. But I mean, there were some rough patches. Liam Eichenberg, it took him a little while to get the motor going too. So sometimes it's not as apparent. You usually see the potential, but for them to kick it into high gear and become an All-American caliber guy. And Joe Alt never gave us a chance to doubt him. He jumped in there halfway through his freshman year. So
Here's since it's on topic, Regine asks, hasn't Fisher said he doesn't like the left side? I don't know that he said he doesn't like this left side. I think he's just aware of the challenges of that, and he was plenty comfortable playing on the right side with Joel playing on the left side because he knows that left tackle is an even bigger.
He was more measured in what he said in the media this year. I asked him that very question maybe early in the year about, hey, do you see maybe being the left tackle at some point in your career? And he was very diplomatic. I'll play quarterback if they want that kind of answer. But the Blake Fisher last year would have answered that question in 2022. We would have gotten a straight answer.
All right. While we are on the offensive line, NC Notre Dame fan asked, what is the difference between Gerby Lambert and Ty Chan? Both were the number one player coming out of Massachusetts. Do you think Chan can get playing time this year? Thank you.
If he can beat out one of those tackles or move inside and beat somebody else inside, there's not a lack of talent with Ty Chan. I hear good things about him. Gerby Lambert, I think, is on a different level coming in the door than Ty Chan. I think he's more highly thought of. Again, I know this is a guy Harry Stan liked a lot before he was even committed to Notre Dame. Harry started the recruiting process with Gerby. So, but I mean, that's what I said. There's a lot of talent on this roster that is younger and inexperienced. So it's not like, Ty Chan is, oh my gosh, he's not turned into anything. I think he's progressing really well.
Yeah, it's a little unfair because we've seen Ty Chan in some practices, and I think he didn't look his best necessarily in those practices. But that's sort of to be expected from a young offensive lineman. So there's plenty of room for improvement there. I think, for my understanding of their games, I think Gerby Lambert is a little bit more athletic than Ty Chan is. And that is something, like if you said, okay, which one of these is more likely to be a left tackle, I would probably say Lambert rather than Chan. But obviously the opportunity is there for Chan to sort of make a big leap. I think he would have to pass some guys up, like Eric mentioned. But certainly I wouldn't rule anything out because it's up for grabs. And at this time last year, we didn't think that Pat Coogan was going to be a starting offensive guard for Notre Dame. So I think there's plenty of ways that the tackle positions could work out for Notre Dame next season. All right, some more questions. Lloyd Christmas asked, should we be looking at McCord, Moore, Will Howard, etc.? I don't understand why not.
Dante Moore?
Yeah.
Because I think Riley Leonard is going to end up at Notre Dame. I don't think that you look at those other guys and invite them in unless you miss on what your first choice was. And I believe Riley Leonard was Notre Dame's first choice. I don't think those guys are bad quarterbacks by any means. The fact that Dante Moore has been changed his mind on things so much, that's a little bit of a red flag for me. I think Will Howard would have been an interesting fit. I don't know as much about Kyle McCord. I don't know how good Kyle McCord is.
Right.
He certainly impressed me in the last drive for Ohio State and Notre Dame Stadium. But I think there are a lot of quarterbacks that could have had pretty good stats with the wide receivers that he had. So I'm not – I would be just as happy to see Steve Angeli get a shot than Kyle McCord, and maybe that's not fair to Kyle McCord, but
yeah, I think I'd go the other way on that one.
Well, I
think that he got so much good experience that I feel like I would if I'm in the transfer portal.
Well, if he starts throwing in Notre Dame's receivers, it's going to be a way different experience. Throwing to Marvin Harrison and Abuka and those guys.
Yeah, so. If I'm a team with good I understand going with Riley Leonard. I don't have a problem with that. And I think when Notre Dame was interested, Notre Dame's known for a while that it wanted to take a grad transfer. likely a grad transfer, but Riley Leonard might not be a grad transfer. So taking an experienced transfer as a potential starter for next year, I don't know that Kyle McCord was a name that many people thought would end up transferring. So I don't even know if Notre Dame was entertaining that. I think you have to at least think about it. It wasn't a name that I had heard that Notre Dame had thought about, but I think if I'm a team with good receivers, I would give Kyle McCord a long look and see if I can cash in on some
well,
of that
he's
experience.
looking at Nebraska, so that's
Yeah.
where he's visiting right now.
Yeah, and he's going to bring Julian Fleming with him, I think was the report that they're visiting there together. So maybe Matt Rule can be the beneficiary of that experience.
What's implied here, I think, Lloyd, what you're implying is why Riley Leonard. And again, there were times where I looked at his stats before I saw him play against Clemson this year, and I had seen him play on TV a couple times before, and I just thought his passing stats don't look great, but when you watch him play, you see why he has the it factor and why he is so highly regarded, because he can toggle between the running game and the passing game.
Yeah,
and he's really an elite runner.
Yeah, I'll give some more thoughts on Riley Leonard. I know we had planned to talk about him a little bit more, so I'll just jump in here with some of my thoughts. I think a lot of people just look at his final stats for the 2023 season, and it's like, man, that doesn't look too hot. But I think the context, which I provided for our subscribers on the Insider Lounge, I don't know, like a week ago maybe, was that he was playing well even through the Notre Dame game. Notre Dame game wasn't necessarily a great game for him, but he had completed 62% of his passes for 912 yards and 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. The touchdown numbers are probably the most shocking when you look at it. He didn't throw for a lot of touchdowns this year. But he played against a lot of good passing defenses. Notre Dame is number 1. The number
Clemson's
2
is in the top 10.
Clemson's number 4, or at least they were going into the last weekend. I don't know if Navy or Army passed them, but Florida State's number 2. Riley Leonard played against Florida State when he was physically compromised, when he was coming back from his high ankle sprain, probably sooner than was really in his best interest. But he wanted to get out there to try to keep Duke's good season going. And didn't play well against Florida State and against Louisville when he he injured a toe against Louisville, and he struggled against that game. And Louisville's defense is pretty good. I mean, look what
22 in pass efficiency defense.
Look what he did, or look what Louisville did to Sam Hartman. So I think you have to look at more than just like Riley Leonard's passing stats to sort of evaluate what he is as a quarterback. And then you look back at this 2022 stats.
And NC State is 23. That's another really good pass defense.
The word on him as a player going into this past season was that he was a potential first-round pick. Mel Kiper Jr. and from the ESPN and Dane Brugler from The Athletic both had him in their top 30s on their big boards going into the season. So there is high expectations for Riley Leonard. He didn't necessarily meet them this past season, but there is a pretty enticing ceiling for him, even if maybe you didn't see that if you saw him play against Notre Dame or watched the games that he played against Duke to finish this season.
All right. Do we want to continue with questions or get to some news and go back to the questions later?
I think that this is a continuation of what we're talking about. Maybe there's something else we can add to it. Philip Eddy says it looks like the wide receiver room has improved in both talent and leadership. If Riley Leonard is the choice, is he the type of quarterback that can read a defense and throw the ball downfield?
If he's on the NFL radar, which he is and was, yes, he is. You just didn't see it a lot this year in Mike Elko's offense, and in part because he tried to play through a high ankle sprain, then tried to play through a toe injury, and then that was the end of his season. But last year, he certainly could. I mean, he had 20 touchdown passes in 2022 with 13 rushing touchdowns. He's got the size for it. So, yeah, I think that would be – I think he's a lot better than what his as Tyler said, his statistics have shown. I would be excited to have him on my team if I were a college football coach.
Yeah. Well, first, Rajon, apologies for saying your name wrong earlier. Thanks for correcting me. I will happily accept corrections because I don't know exactly how all you guys say your name. So thank you for clarifying that. Hopefully I remember it for next time. Here's another question from Timothy Holland. Any chance that one of Notre Dame's receivers that jumped into the portal returns to the team? I believe Chris Tyree is the only wide receiver who has committed elsewhere. Thanks. And then Johnny S. rightfully chimed in saying that Braylon James has committed to TCU, which he did today.
Right.
So do you think there's a chance Rico Flores comes back to Notre Dame, or who's the other one that Tobias Merriweather?
I don't think Tobias is coming back. I mean, maybe Rico, but I think it's really difficult. Once they get in there, they're getting love from other schools and they're getting ready to take visits. I think it's hard, unless you're not getting any offers. I think it's hard to hit the brakes and say, wait a minute, I made a mistake. I mean, I think that Marcus's message after he fired Chancey Stuckey was that I'm going to bring in somebody really good. And the rumors about Mike Brown happened pretty quickly. Now, I think Rico was already in by that point. And Mike Brown is the new wide receivers coach. We'll add that he is going to coach in the bowl game. He's already at work. It becomes official once they get through their, never-ending vetting process. But they felt comfortable enough to announce him officially and let us know that he's on the job and that he will coach the wide receivers in the bowl game. So let's build off of that, Tyler, a little bit. What does Mike Brown bring to the table? Because I think people look at that and say, well, Marcus hired one of his friends. So in terms of differentiating him from one of his friends, what does Mike Brown bring to Notre Dame?
Yeah, I think it was like the double whammy of easy and I would say lazy takes. Is that what do we want Wisconsin's wide receivers coach for? And why does Notre Dame have to keep going to coaches that have connections to Marcus Freeman or coached at Cincinnati? One, he was only Wisconsin's wide receivers coach for 1 year, so we don't know that would hold Wisconsin's passing game against him. They were in a transition year. They had to play two different quarterbacks because of injury, and obviously this is an overhauling of that offense there for Luke Fickell, taking over the Wisconsin program. The things to like and the reasons to say I don't care who he knows is what he did at Cincinnati. He turned three-star recruits into NFL draft picks. That's Alec Pierce, who was a 2018 three-star recruit. He ended up being drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. Trey Tucker is another three-star recruit who ended up getting drafted in the third round of the 2023 draft. And then Tyler Scott was a fourth-round pick in the 2023 draft. And all those guys, the majority of their playing careers, if not all of their playing careers, happened with Mike Brown at Cincinnati coaching them. And so those are pretty good reasons to believe in his ability to develop talent at the wide receiver position. Certainly, I think the biggest question mark that I have is his ability to recruit. Doesn't have a long resume. Certainly, Cincinnati was recruiting at a different level early on in his career. I think by the time you get to cash in on the success that Cincinnati have, then the staff has now left and maybe isn't building on that the way they could have. So he only signed one four-star recruit while coaching at Cincinnati and had one four-star wide receiver recruit committed to him at Wisconsin. That's Kyan Barry Johnson from Bolingbrook, Illinois.
Given the fact that Cincinnati wasn't a Power 5 program until this year, and Wisconsin doesn't sign scads of four-star wide receivers. They do other positions, but not that position. I think it's impressive.
I think this is a good follow-up from Johnny S. Don't most coaches look at who they know and trust first?
I think that certainly plays into who you're looking at. I think when you open up a search, you kind of look at both, but yeah, there's a trust level that comes with somebody that you've worked with before, that you know their work and you know their work ethic and you know their team chemistry. And so there's pluses for that. That's the same thing kind of in our business, even though we've made hires at the South Bend Tribune outside of that. We've also made hires inside of it for people that we knew and certainly gave them interviews because we thought highly of them. And there are fewer surprises. Sometimes there's really good surprises from somebody outside, but sometimes there's not.
Yeah, and if Marcus Freeman didn't know a good wide receivers coach, then maybe he would have had to go outside of his Rolodex. But it seems like Mike Brown is a good wide receivers coach, an up and coming one, and we'll see if Notre Dame has made the right choice there and can get the most out of Mike Brown, and he can get the most out of the receivers that they have on the roster. All right, I think that's about it from questions.
Okay.
I mean, John Erickson said, "Did you guys see that ND soccer player kicking for the Cowboys last night?"
I didn't watch him. I know Aubrey hit a 59 and a 60-yarder. I think I saw that's the first time somebody had 2 field goals that were that long in a game. And he's, I believe, 28 for 28 on the season, which is amazing.
I think he's up to 30 for 30 after last night.
Okay, well, then they can do a 30 for 30 on him.
And I think that might be the best streak to start a career. And
a guy that didn't even play college football.
Yeah, wasn't even a college football player.
They could use him on the soccer team tonight. They're down 2-0 here in the second half. So.
Yeah, that could spell doom for the Irish then.
Yes, that is a long comeback, but they beat Clemson 3-2 early in the year, so maybe they have 3 goals in them in the last 18 minutes or whatever. So,
all right, I got another question if you want to keep going with questions.
Okay.
Rick Fairman asked, "What is the feeling of the O-line coach and their progress? The line had a series of games that made fans." I don't know what grinder thoughts means. But I think we got the gist there. What is the feeling of the O-line coach?
It must be a Canadian expression because I know Rick is from Canada. Either that or he had a typo.
I'm guessing typing. I'm guessing typo.
Okay. I mean, I know Joe Rudolph had a good reputation nationally when he was at Wisconsin. Then he went to Virginia Tech for a year and came to Notre Dame. I know that opinion isn't universal, but I think he was regarded as one of the better offensive line coaches in the country. I mean, he certainly put a lot of guys into the pros at Wisconsin. He's a guy that played in the NFL himself. He's been an offensive coordinator in stints at both Wisconsin and Pittsburgh. So I'm open to seeing what he is in year 2. I don't know that I was blown away from everything that happened this year. I think he had some difficult circumstances. And it's hard because you're comparing him to Harry Hiestand, and I'm not going to make a Chilean sea bass analogy here, but
3 times.
It's difficult. It's difficult to compare anybody to Harry Hiestand. I mean, among the offensive line coaches that are in college football that are currently, I'd still say he qualifies as one of the better ones, and I'm eager to see what he does next year. So that's where I stand. I'm more open-minded than I am conclusive on what I saw from. And you wonder again how much of this is related to an offensive coordinator who is just kind of getting his feet wet.
Yeah, and I'll add this comment here, and I'll put Rick's question back up. Sean Garney said the O-line got 8 up this year. I don't know that I would agree with that sentiment.
I don't think you make the Joe Moore Award semifinal list if you got 8 eaten up.
I think their life was made more difficult with loaded boxes. And then Notre Dame brought more tight ends in the mix, which sometimes can be great. Sometimes can leave you a bit exposed because with that tight end usually comes another guy that's willing and capable of tackling. And if the tight ends aren't always winning, then you're put in a bad spot there. So Notre Dame certainly had its ups and downs as an offensive line. I thought they protected the quarterback really well. I think the interior line struggled a little bit with that. Blake Fisher didn't have his best season as a pass blocker either. So I understand why there might be some questions about Joe Rudolph. I don't think it didn't seem to me that Zeke Correll took another step forward or necessarily Blake Fisher in any significant way. Now maybe that's more specific to those guys than it is Joe Rudolph. I don't know. Like maybe they wouldn't have been better with Harry Hiestand. Maybe they would have. Given Harry Hiestand's track record, you'd like to think that he would have. But I don't know. Zeke Correll, I think Zeke Correll's issue, and I think it was a recurring one, was just some physical limitations that sometimes he wasn't able to sort of physically dominate in some scenarios, and was able to and allowed some penetration because of that, particularly with head up nose guards. And so I think that was a little bit of an issue, but certainly Joe Alt didn't get worse. I mean, I think that would certainly be an indictment if Joe Alt did get worse, considering how good he is and was. But I think there were some reasons to believe, like Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler sort of improved as the year went on. I think you didn't see huge drop-offs when guys were asked to play at the end of the season in their place with Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig. So some reason to believe that those guys can be potentially could potentially influence the offensive line makeup next season. So I would say the jury's still out on Joe Rudolph's Notre Dame tenure for sure, but he certainly has a track record of developing and producing offensive lines that block well.
Okay, well, back to the news of the day. Joe Alt and Xavier Watts clinched consensus All-America status today, and they are both in the running for unanimous All-America honors. Watts would be the first ever Notre Dame safety to do that if it happens. You don't have a lot of unanimous All-Americans. Notre Dame has had 5 in the 2000s so far, the most recent being Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in 2020. Both were named to the Walter Camp first team on Friday. So there's 5 organizations that determine consensus and unanimous All-Americans. You can clinch consensus honors with 3 first team honors from the football writers, from the AP, Walter Camp. The other 2 that haven't come out yet are the American Football Coaches Association and the Sporting News. Howard Cross was a second-team All-American on all 3 of those. Audric Estime was a second-team selection on the AP team that was released today. And Watts won the Nagurski Trophy last Monday night, I think right after we were on the air, right, Tyler?
Yeah. Or no, yeah. Who knows? It's all.
I didn't write the story until after we were off the air. I will say that. He will play in the bowl game, and he may very well come back to Notre Dame. He's got next year mapped out. He's going to get a master's degree in May if he stays at Notre Dame and doesn't go into the draft. Howard Cross is going to play in the bowl game and is coming back to Notre Dame in 2024, as we mentioned a little bit earlier. That's huge. Joe Alt got snubbed for some individual honors.
Yeah.
Tyler, was there anybody who did not get All-American status that you thought at least deserved consideration?
I would just like to add that I will no longer take the Outland Trophy serious. I should have stopped taking it serious after they snubbed Quentin Nelson, but after snubbing Joe Alt, they have a serious issue with Notre Dame players clearly, because I don't know what they're judging. Anyways, rant over. In terms of All-American guys, I think you could have made a case for either Cam Hart or Benjamin Morrison. I think if you look at the PFF metrics, Cam Hart may have had a better season. Benjamin Morrison was sort of thrown at more this season. Neither of them had like the interceptions that you tend to need at the cornerback position to make an All-American team, which is probably why they didn't make one. And I think that's a big reason why Xavier Watts is getting the acclaim that he did, because of all the interceptions that he was able to attain this season. Do you think anyone else that I didn't mention?
You said Morrison and Hart?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say those guys were the ones that would be in the mix. The thing about Morrison, you look at the stats of the guys that he defended, and it was pretty consistently a big dip in their stats when they played Notre Dame. Now, again, sometimes Hart had him, sometimes Morrison had him. The other thing that hurt Morrison is a lot of times guys that vote or people that vote on these awards, they will look at who the NFL likes. They'll look at the Mel Kiper top 10 lists, and Morrison isn't on those yet because he's a sophomore.
Yeah.
And so he was hurt a little bit by that. And he didn't get into the Tommy Kramer copycat.
He wasn't a 5-star. He wasn't a 5-star recruit, so that doesn't help you either.
Right. So, okay, more questions or keep going here?
I don't think any other questions. I thought there was a funny comment here from John Erickson. My Christmas prayer is that none of these people that are always looking to move on from that coach or this player never marry my daughter. And then Mike DeVoy said, how was Kyle Hamilton not a unanimous All-American?
Because he didn't play
most
of it. He only played half a year his junior year, and then his sophomore year was his first year as a starter. So he only played in 6 games. The fact that he was All-American at all was a little bit of a miracle, just based on 6 games. So, yeah, otherwise, had he played the whole season, yes, he would have been. He was a consensus All-American. That half a season was good enough to get him on that list, but he was not a unanimous All-American.
Another one from Ray. Oh, sorry. Did you have something else?
Nope.
Another one from Rajon is Jack Kaiser staying?
He is considering it. I thought I know he told me his mindset going into the season was that this was going to be his last year. And then with Maris Leofau and with JD Bertrand moving along, there may be enough of an enticement for him to stay. He would also have a chance to go play in the NFL. I'm sure there are other teams that would love to have a guy with that kind of efficiency and that kind of experience on their teams. I think he has 27 degrees from Notre Dame, so he could probably be a professor next year if he wanted to. That was funny, Tyler.
Sorry, I'm responding to a question. Sean Gorney keeps asking about Nick Howard. I don't know who Nick Howard. I don't know if he means Will Howard. So I was trying to ask that in the chat while you made a joke. So I didn't give you the applause or the laughter that you deserve. I'm sorry.
Okay, while you're answering questions, I'll share a little bit more news. Michael Carmody, who at one point was a starting left tackle on Notre Dame's team for 1 game or 2 during the 2021 season, he submitted his name to the transfer portal today, Monday. He has been injured a lot during his career. Pretty promising young guy earlier in his career. Joey Tonona and walk-on Skip Vallata went into the portal late last week. Joey Tonona already has a home in Purdue. He is a guy that had taken a medical retirement. It's easier to unretire medically at another school than it is your current school. The other guys that have found homes are Zeke Correll at NC State. We mentioned Braylon James at TCU, Nana Osafo-Mensah, TCU, Tonona, Purdue, and then Chris Tyree, Virginia, was the first one who landed at a new school.
Okay, I did get some clarity from Sean Gorney, and I just didn't track who it was. The question was, curious your thoughts on Nick Howard. His highlights really impressed me. With our offense, I would take him over Riley Leonard. And Nick Howard is the Dartmouth QB who visited Notre Dame, I think, this past weekend, who, from my understanding, is not being considered as a scholarship quarterback. I think he would be a potential walk-on if Notre Dame wanted to add a walk-on. But someone who visits Notre Dame and Butler in the same weekend, we're talking about a different caliber of quarterback than Riley Leonard, in my opinion. I don't know if you have any other thoughts than that, Eric.
I will stand with your thoughts.
All right. Okay, I think that's it on questions. Sorry for not giving you your laughter.
Okay. A couple last little tidbits here, and then we'll either wrap up or Tyler will find more questions or more dad humor. The new Rivals 2025 Top 250 is coming up tomorrow, and so we'll know how Notre Dame's recruits in that class are ranked. Notre Dame resumes practice this weekend after final exams. we'll have access on Saturday. Anything else, Tyler, that you want to throw in or questions you want to take?
No, I would say keep an eye out for that Rivals 2025. I have seen it. There will be some new Notre Dame commits on that list. Well, the commits aren't new, but there will be commits that are newly on the list. So keep an eye out for that. Notre Dame fans may be excited about the upgrades and opinions on some of its current 2025 commits that Rivals will be releasing. There is a question here. If it's there's some typos. Rajon apologized. He wanted to know if Notre Dame, if Jack Kaiser doesn't stay, would Notre Dame go to the portal for a linebacker? Do we think?
I don't think so. As long as you were confident everybody else, you could always go in the springtime. I think you look at who they've got. They've got some incredible young talent coming up. Boy, Nolan Ziegler's videos have been pretty impressive. His 22-something per miles per hour and his dunking and so forth. But you have Jalen Sneed, you have Viliamu Asa, Preston Zinner, Jaden Osbury, Drake Bowen. There's a lot of good young talent that's coming up. And I think Notre Dame would be comfortable with the numbers unless there were an injury in the spring, and then maybe they would go to the portal to bring somebody in. But I almost think it would be more of a depth piece than it would be a potential starter, because I think you have a lot of potential starters with that group, really talented athletes. I mean, you're going to see, I know people have been waiting for this wave of linebackers to come. Well, they're going to be here. And then there's a couple other freshmen coming in as well, besides Viliamu Asa.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame would be lacking some experience, certainly. So I think you would at least maybe look into some options there. But you should like the guys that do have at least experience in knowing Notre Dame's defense. That could potentially help you next year. So I think it's sort of hard. Like linebacker is important that you want experience at, but if they don't have experience in this defense, I think that could be a pretty large learning curve. So if you're relying on that as the reason to go get a linebacker, then maybe that could be a tough fit. So I think Notre Dame would be a little bit picky there if they decided to go in the linebacker portal market. All right, I think that's it, Eric.
Okay. I appreciate everybody for tuning in tonight. Wake the neighbors, tell your friends, have them meet us here next Monday at 7:00. We'll have another show brought to you by Legacy Heating and Air, who was at my house recently doing the maintenance plan. They're awesome. And thanks to Tyler James for correcting all of our grammar and spelling and not laughing at my Chilean sea bass jokes.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I owe Eric some laughs after missing the Chilean sea bass joke, and then whatever one he made.
The other one was legitimately funny.
I just totally missed it. I was in the comments trying to sort out what was going on there. But like Rajon says, hit the like button, subscribe to our Inside ND Sports channel, comment your thoughts after the video, even if we're not live. If you disagree with anything we said, we certainly would like to hear your opinions. We also have a 30-day free trial of InsideNDSports.com available to first-time subscribers. Use promo code NDYT when you sign up to get free access to our premium analysis, recruiting and portal coverage, and access to us over on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend a lot of our time and tell our subscribers what we know that is going on before we tell anyone else. So there's a link to sign up for that in the video description for this video. You'll hear us again on Thursday if you're an Inside ND Sports podcast listener. That's when we plan to record this week rather than our typical Tuesday. And that should do it for us this week, and we will talk to you later.